Hello everyone, just gonna make a quick video about the Cyclone. The generator is here, but I'm just waiting on the charger and the wiring. So I want to do a quick installation tips and videos and a comparison with the 3 kilowatt hub. So this is a 3 kilowatt hub that I found on eBay. It's around $5.50 with shipping. It comes with a nice display, and then you have your controller and whatnot. Obviously the hub itself, you need to buy like torque arms for this because it's quite a powerful kit. And then here's the Cyclone kit that comes, and it depends on the one that you get, but the one from Sick Bike Parts has actually waterproof connections, which are a little bit better, and also a Bluetooth dongle so that you can configure the controller itself. And so now I'm gonna talk about the differences, and this is just my opinion. It might be a little bit, might be skewed because I have the Cyclone itself. So the Cyclone is the cheapest kit, 3 kilowatt kit. It's $350. The 3 kilowatt hub is $550. It's great for hill climbing because you have gears. You can switch to like the first gear, and it'll be really easy to get up big hills. The weight distribution is really nice. Obviously the motor is right beneath your pedal, right beneath your butt, right in the middle of the bike, so it's really nice. There's also no cogging, which means that if you're not using the motor, or the motor is just, or you're just coasting, there's no resistance from the from the magnets from a hub. The bad thing is that it's a double chain setup. What that means is that you have the chain going back to your rear wheel, and you also have the chain between the drive sprocket of the motor and the pedal crank sprockets. And I had numerous times where this chain jumps and whatnot. The other disadvantage is that there's gears and bearings inside the actual motor itself versus a hub motor, which doesn't have the actual any. To my knowledge, there's no gears inside a gearless hub motor, and there's probably bearings, but that's pretty hard to mess up. So I'm having noise in my motor. I believe it's probably one of the bearings that are going bad in the Cyclone. The other bad thing about the Cyclone is that there's no regen. So you don't have the regen that you can get from, a hub motor. Also, the other thing is, and this is, I actually really believe this. So you have gears on a Cyclone, right? So the Cyclone can use gears, but there's no way you're going to actually use the gears yourself when you're pedaling when the motor is under power. The motor is just so much stronger than you can be. So for example, a typical person does around 100 and probably 150 watts of power. They're going to be pretty winded doing that. But the Cyclone can produce 3 kilowatts of power. So there's no way that you're going to do anything when you try to pedal using the same, when the motor's under operation, especially on the lower gears up the, or on the taller gears up the hills. So I think a lot of kits, or say that okay, you can also pedal it. You have the advantages of using different gears, but that's only for the motor. Unless you have like a 750 watt or like a 500 watt or a 250 watt mid drive, a 3 kilowatt Cyclone, you're nothing you do is gonna really matter. You can help it off the line, obviously, by pedaling, but it's not, for the hills. It's not really gonna help that much, and that's the so going to the 3 kilowatt hub, so you can use gears, and this is where it's important because let's just say you put like 1,000 watt of power into the hub, right? And the hub moves independent of the gears. So then you can go on the first gear, a hill climbing gear, and you can really kind of help it start off, and go up and down the gears as you would to provide assistance to the bike, depending on your speed and depending on your situation. You can't do this with a Cyclone because, again, the Cyclone is just so powerful that anything you do, for example, you're going 30 miles per hour, you're not really going to add that much more power. There's no way you can, as yourself, can go 30 miles per hour on a bike with batteries at the Cyclone and everything. It's just too heavy for you to physically pedal. You could do it, probably add some help, but you'll be way too winded. So what I'm saying is that the whole notion of having gears on a Cyclone is only important because the Cyclone can use the gears, not because you can use the gears. Sorry, it cut off there a little bit. But so there's no moving parts, which is great. In this case, you won't have like gears being meshed. So with the Cyclone, they actually told after the fact, they told me you should actually open up the Cyclone and take out the grease and put in new synthetic grease in. So you don't have to do that with a 3 kilowatt hub, I think. The hub also has regen, and it's actually a little bit more quiet. Even though the Cyclone is quiet compared to obviously a gas engine, it does make some noise. And the 3 kilowatt hub it's virtually silent. There'll be no way anyone can tell that you are actually pedaling or under power, unless they see that you're twisting the throttle or whatnot. So that's kind of one of the advantages of the 3 kilowatt hub. But the other thing is that it does have cogging, which for some people suck, and the weight distribution will be a little bit more skewed towards the rear of the bike, which is okay. I mean, so there's so many 3 kilowatt hubs out there that there's just more 3 kilowatt high power hub motors than there are mid Cyclones. And I think there's a reason why. It's just much more simple than the Cyclone, especially if you just want to get going. The other thing is that you might have to actually help it up the hills a little bit, especially if you're a heavier rider. You want to not kind of put too much amps into the motor, especially going up a hill and going slow. So you might need to help it up the like really difficult hills. So that's about it. So those are the kind of the advantages and disadvantages of a 3 kilowatt Cyclone versus the hub. I had a 500-watt hub and also a 1,000-watt hub before, and just from the two, like the whole thing about, and I also had a whole bunch of gas engine bicycles. The whole thing with the electric is that you just want it to be simple. You don't want the maintenance, and with the Cyclone, you just have to. It's just not. It's very reliable, obviously, much more reliable than gas engine, but it's just not as reliable and as simple as a hub. So I would say if you had to decide between the two, the Cyclone is 350 and the hub is 550 from China. So you have to wait a little bit more for the hub. I would just get the hub, to be honest. And if I do build another bike in the future, I'll probably get a hub and just leave the Cyclone on this bike and sell it or something like that. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think people might have different opinions. It might just be because I didn't install it correctly or whatnot. But that's my opinion. So here is an installation guide for this site. So let me preface by saying that there's actually a guide on Unicycles. Unicycles made 2 videos that I also used to install the Cyclone, and they're pretty straightforward. So my guide would just be a bumbling mess of just random thoughts and things that I encounter with my installation, which it's not an installation guide, it's just kind of like tips and thoughts that I have. But I'll post the Unicycle links in the description below, so make sure you check that out if you're assessing the difficulty of installing the Cyclone. The biggest thing is that to make sure you install it on a good bike, not a rusted out bike like I did. So without further ado, here is the guide and tips, the tips. I'm just going to do a quick video about the installation of the Cyclone. Actually, there's a set of videos from Unicycles that go over this installation, but I'll put the link for those videos in the description below. But I'll just go over some of the key things that you need to do, maybe provide a little bit better perspective on it. But the first things is that here are kind of the tools that you need. You'll need I guess this is a pedal puller or crank puller right there. You'll need a chain breaker to cut the chain that comes with the bike, or that comes with the kit. And you'll need this kind of hook thing for the lock rings. This part hooks into the actual ring itself, so you can tighten it. And on the So this is the one tool I didn't get on the drive side of the bike. To tighten the bottom bracket that comes with the kit, you need kind of like a outside toothed wrench or something like that. But what I did instead, I just used the pliers, a big plier, adjustable plier, and just tightened it as best as I could. And the reason why I did that was because, and when you do the installation for this, make sure you do it on a good bike. This is a really bad Walmart bike, which I found that the bottom bracket was pretty rusted. So what happened was that when I tried to put in the new bottom bracket for the kit, it couldn't go all the way. I couldn't tighten it all the way on the drive side because there's so much rust, and I was afraid that I would start like what's the word for it? Harming the threads on the bottom bracket against the rusted out I guess cavity or bore on the bike. So I didn't tighten it. I tightened it as best as I could, but I didn't want to like really crank it all the way. So that might have caused a couple of problems. So anyway, let's just go to the first step that you have to do is here's the Cyclone right here, and I'm not sure. Hopefully you can see this. The first thing you do is you remove the bottom bracket on your bike. So these are the pedals that came with the kit. So your bike, just imagine this is a bike without the motor. So first thing you do, you'll remove your pedals because the kit doesn't actually come with pedals. So you have to use the pedals from your old crank set, and that's pretty easy. You just kind of, there's like a nut on the side, and there's like a flat nut on the side for mine, and you just kind of just loosen it up with a wrench. The second thing you need to do is to remove the pedals themselves. And this, you need that pedal crank remover tool, which is this thing here. And so this thing is pretty dirty. So what you do is you push this inside here. Oops. Let me make sure I'm doing this correctly. Sorry. You go on this side here. You tighten it like this, and this goes inside here. You screw it into the actual pedal crank, into the threads here, and it locks up. And after that, you tighten the screw into it, and it will push out. Alright, the first thing you do is you take out the nut. I'm sorry, you take out the nut first, and then you put this thing into there, and you tighten this this bolt in, and this bolt will eventually push out the whole pedal crank. So if you don't do this, it's going to be really, you need to have this because there's a taper inside that locks this pedal to the axle, and there's no way you can like physically pull out the pedal in that taper. It's just way too tight. So that's why you need a tool like this to put, after you remove the nut, you push this in, and then you can take out the pedals. So after you take out the pedals on both sides, and on the drive side is a left hand thread, so you have to go the other direction on it. Okay, after you do that, your bike, depending on the kind, so this depends on each bike. So mine's a very low cost bike, so it just had lock rings on it. So you just remove the lock rings and you take out the bottom bracket, which has like, there should be bearings inside. It could be sealed bearings or it could be loose bearings. In my case, it was loose bearings. What that means is once you take out those bearings, if it's a loose bearing setup, there's no way, there's little chance that you're going to actually put back the original pedal and bottom bracket. So once that comes out, you put in the new bottom bracket that they give you on both on the bottom, and you try to fit the motor as best as you can. Here you put these arms on the motor here using these attach points, and same on the other side, and you try to fit it into the bottom bracket as best as you can, and you just kind of just have to use the lock rings to jostle them around a little bit just to position it so that it's kind of even here. So And also there's two bottom brackets that they give you generally with the kit. One for a fat tire bike, which is 100, I think it's like 90 to 100 millimeters, and the other one is for a regular bike such as this, like 60 something to 70 something millimeters. So you have to use the smaller one obviously for a bike like this, unless you have a fat tire bike. Okay, so after you get the bottom bracket on, and it's pretty simple. It comes with sealed bearings also. So after you put that on, and you just try to, it's probably a good thing to have your bike upside down at this point, because it will make the motor easier to hold up. The motor will be upside down, so it will be resting against your bottom tube here, instead of like, you have to hold it up and try to position everything. So after you position everything together, you start tightening things down. And I think I would recommend tightening both at the same time, so that you get kind of like a sense of where the pedal needs to be or how far the pedal is pushing out. After you tighten that up, after it's kind of hand tight at the point where it can stay by itself, then you need to use this tool here for the lock rings on the non-drive side. So there will be 2 or 3 lock rings, and you can use them also as spacers on the non-drive side. And on the drive side, I just used a plier to tighten that. It's kind of hard to see. I just used a plier instead of that special wrench that they have to tighten it down. But yeah, use the wrench, don't use the pliers, because you actually need I think to operate the motor correctly, it needs to be flush with the frame of the bike, which mine isn't, because I didn't want to ruin the bottom bracket because it was so rusted. I feel like if I tighten it any more with the pliers, it will start stripping away the threads, and then just make the bottom bracket pretty much, make both the bottom bracket and also the bore inside the bore threads inside the bike useless. So that's why I didn't do that. But that might be the reason why that I'm getting some bad sounds from the motor now, because maybe there's too much. It's because it's not aligned 100%. There's some wear on the bearings there, and it's causing that noise. But anyway, that's kind of the overcap. And then once this change should be extremely tight. There should be really little play in this chain. So you need to make sure that the tensioner that you put on is pretty tight against this chain. There should be like less than half an inch of play on this chain and on the top and the bottom chain here. And this goes, so the pedal crank, they give you 3. So the outside one is for the motor. The 2 inner ones are for to drive the back wheel. And you should really put it on the smallest cog so that it doesn't lug the motor, especially if you're heavier. You want to probably put it on a smaller cog so that you don't lug the motor. Since I'm pretty light, I decided to put on the 44 tooth outside instead of, I believe, the 36 inside. So maybe that's one of the reasons why the motor is making noise now too, because it's been lugging all this time. But anyway, that's kind of and also for to keep the motor from just kind of flopping around during operations, they give you a hose clamp and also a pretty durable durable plastic, I forgot what it's called, like a plastic, but I replaced that plastic with just a hose clamp, and I make sure that this is pretty tight and pretty permanent, so that it doesn't kind of flop around anywhere that causes undue stress when the motor's in operation. So that's about it, I think. Let's see, any other things. Yeah, just make sure that this chain is really tight. Some of these chains might jump and fall into the inside. You can actually, you don't have to remove the entire pedal crank assembly here with the gears, with the cogs to put it back on. You actually can put it back on. It does take some patience to do it, but you don't. Yeah, so you don't have to remove it. I used to remove it in the beginning because I didn't know what I was doing, but you don't actually have to remove it to get it back on, even though it seems like you might have to. You can actually do it with engine pressure. Obviously if it falls in there, there's probably a way to get it back out without removing the actual cogs and the pedal. This has to be really tight. Make sure that's tight. as possible. Make sure that there's very little play. And in terms, for me, I like to put it on the third. I don't like to go on the second or the first gear or on tall gears, because because there's so much power in this kit. It like if this spins too fast, there's a chance that it can jump the, because of the wear on the chain and on the pedal and on the sprocket teeth. If it's too fast, I feel it can jump. You can jump here, and then obviously you need to put it back on, which is a pain in the ass. So usually I just keep it on third, fourth, fifth, or sixth gear. Usually the third to start out with, but usually I just leave it on the third because I mean that's good enough speed for me. But anyway, so that's kind of the thoughts that I have on it. Now I'm gonna go back and try to discuss the differences between my recommendations between the Cyclone and just a typical 3 kilowatt hub motor.